Hey guys, so we're back. The reason that this video is two parts is just because I had filmed the comic book haul, and then I was filming the deck here basically, and then all of a sudden my camera said it was out of room, out of memory for videos, because the comic book haul was about 20, and then we were up to about 16 on the deck until it ran out. So picking up where we left off, it's now hours later. I've actually gone to the store to get some I've lost this word for it, sleeves for the deck, and then also I picked up this just this easy peasy Game Genic card holder. $2.99. I was for a while there when I first started doing the commander decks. I would buy one of these big Game Genic things. Like every time I made a deck, and I have 3 decks over here that have fancy single holders for themselves because they're that good. And I have a couple more. I have I think 5 single deck holders, and then these two deck holders. But these 2 deck ones are like $36. The single ones are like 16 or so. So finally I was like, I need to stop spending $26 per deck to house it. So I started just getting the the plastic ones here. So sorry, my wife likes to give to charity, and then they like to call her. Anyways, let's pick up where we left off. So I have a few more non-creature spells before we get to the creatures. So this one is really my only removal in this deck. It's targets creatures controller sacrifices it, and then they get some elf tokens in equal to its power. So not great, but at the same time, this would get rid of indestructible creatures because the creature's controller is sacrificing it. The most recent game we had, we ran into a load of indestructible creatures, which kind of hampered our ability to move forward. I might look through my white and just switch out maybe 1 or 2 of these cards for one more thing that can put something in exile, but I think the army building in this deck is where it's at. So let's see, we have Oath of Ajani, which puts a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and makes planeswalker spells you cast cost 1 less. So again, just to build up the army with the 1/1 counters. And then we have Aladmir's Call, which is basically a tutor for creatures. So you pay 2 and search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Obviously, tutors nowadays are huge, so to have a specific creature out of this creature-heavy deck was a good idea. And then finally, for the non-creatures, we have Ajani, Mentor of Heroes. He's a little expensive at 5, but his +1 is distribute 3 1/1 counters. Basically, as you wish, cross 1, 2, or 3 target creatures. So I can just boost one person up +3, or distribute them out. The other +1 is to look at the top 4 cards of your library, reveal an aura creature or planeswalker, and put it into your hand. So kind of a bit of a tutor for the top 4. And then his -8 is gain 100 life. I almost got, I have another Ajani in I think it's my white and red Boros deck, which I almost got the ultimate off this past week. The ultimate was I basically made I think a 2/2 cat creature for every 1 life I had, and I was at like 45 life at the time. And my playgroup quickly stats out, which would have been hilarious because they weren't paying attention to them for a few turns. So the next cards are the, well, let me show you the lands really quick, just for the heck of it. Nothing too exciting. The one thing in here that I wanted to do was I used all the Innistrad plains and forests that I could. And while the deck is a little bit more to the plain side than forests, and I normally do the math and try to be exact, a lot of these cards are one of each. So I went with a little bit more of a 50-50 split on here. So those are cool. I love the look of those in I made a demon deck not too long ago, and I tried to use all of the red and black Innistrad lands along with some of the Beyond Death Theros, those ones that have they're like the enchantment lands, you know. So we have Gross and Verge, enters tapped. You can tap for 1 colorless, or you can pay 2 and sack to search your library for a forest and a plains and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So you get that out early enough and pay 2, and the next turn you'd have 4, which works for me. We have Temple Garden, which is basically a pain land, so you can pay 2 and have it entered untapped, white and green, obviously. And then we just have a few of the just enter the battlefield tap, guild gates and such. So Celestia Sanctuary, which taps for 2 and you have to return a land. We have Temple of Plenty, which is enters tapped and lets you scree 1. Blossoming Sands, entered tapped and you gain 1 life. Thornglint Bridge, which is indestructible because it's an artifact land. And then I have Prismatic Vista in here. Pay 1 life and sack. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, untapped, and then shuffle. And then obviously just the regular old command tower here, because we all got those in so many of these precons. So those are always good to have. And then let's see, finally we have the creatures, which is the bulk of the deck, probably about maybe not 2/3, but pretty close. And these are in order of mana cost. So actually I'll start with the low ones first. So first we have Lunarc Veteran. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So obviously when I play a creature, I get another creature for free with my commander. So he'll be spitting out a good amount of life if I can get this guy out and he's not killed. He has a disturb cost of 2, which gets you a flying version, which basically gives you 1 life whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield. So, one side is people entering, one side is people leaving, and you gain life either way. Next we have just a Birds of Paradise. I just want to have a cheap jump blocker if I really, really needed it, and also just a cheap mana dork. So 1 mana of any color, which is why Birds of Paradise is such a good green card. We have Avison's Pilgrim. 1 green for a tap to add 1 plains to your mana pool. So, if by chance I get him out first turn, I have both mana colors by turn 2, with no issue as far as what I pull for lands. That's the end of the mana dorks. So next we have the more fun creatures. So this is Shauna Sisay's Legacy. She can't be the target of abilities your opponents control, so she has hexproof. And she gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. So obviously helping to get her out later turns where she's hexproof and gigantic from the amount of free creatures we have. Sunmane Familiar. Whenever commander you control attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it, which is helpful. Unfortunately, my commander is not a partner, so I can't run both of them. But realistically, if I can get him out and start pumping, that would be pretty helpful. We have Talia, Guardian of Thraben, which was one of the new cards. First strike and non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. So since this is a creature-heavy deck, this plus that, what's the, Crystal of Amethyst or something like that, every non-creature spell costs 2 more. That's in my, Gruul deck with, that one troll commander that, he does 6 damage to you if you, play a non-creature spell. So I have that in there, but Talia making it a little bit harder for people to respond to things. We have Plarish Blade Trainee, which is one of the new cards. She has the training capability, and when she dies, you can move her counters to any other creature you control. So as I said, the training is whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So basically they're pumping themselves up the more they go into battle. So obviously with this deck I will be swinging a lot. And basically it'll be just, build up a army and then get somebody with a higher power out there to start leading the charge. We have Intrepid Adversary, which is one of the mythics from, what was the name of that? We just had that, the Midnight Hunt. There we go. Sheesh. Lifelink. When he enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, you put that one many valor counters on Intrepid Adversary, and creatures you control get +1/+1 for each valor counter. So if you put him out and pay 4, he would enter with 1 valor counter, and everybody would get +1/+1. If you pay 6, everybody would get +2/+2, and so on and so forth. And realistically, that covers himself, so you're pumping him too. Because it says creatures you control, not other creatures. From Theros, one of my favorite sets, we have Fleecemane Lion. You pay 2 for a 3/3, so he's cheap, and he would be training the human soldiers I'm putting out. And for 5, he can become Monstrous 1, so he'd be a 4/4. And at that point, he would get Hexproof and Indestructible. So pretty, cheap entry fee for a 3/3 to start pumping creatures early on. Because of the counters, we have Dusk Shellcrawler from Modern Horizons 2. When they enter, you can put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has trample. So obviously with this card, one swing with a higher powered creature, and everybody on my side of the board, as far as the army, would have a 1/1 counter, and they would all have trample. So that could get out of hand quickly, obviously. Conclave Mentor from M21. Pay 2 if 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a creature you control. That many +1 are put on there instead. So, if we swing and we train, we would train twice. They would go from 1/1s to 3/3s with 1 attack. And then, when Conclave Mentor dies, you gain life equal to its power. So, if she starts pumping herself, then once she passes, you would get a life boost from her. In the vein of Fleecemane Lion, we have Bronzehide Lion. Pay 2 for a 3/3, so again, he's a cheap 3/3. You pay 2 and he gains Indestructible until end of turn. And when he dies, you return him to the battlefield as an enchantment aura. And whatever creature he enchants gets, pay 2, enchant creature gains Indestructible. So realistically, if I get him out early and he does happen to pass, somehow I could put him on my commander and have some protection there. This is another just broke. This thing's just broken in this deck. This is Arcus Acolyte. For 2, you get a 2/2 with reach and lifelink, and Outlast 1. The Outlast is from the Targear sets, and basically it's you pay 1 and tap to put a 1/1 counter on this creature. You can only do that as a sorcery, and each other creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has Outlast 1. So basically I could put her out, pump my entire army with itself, just tapping them, and then, yeah, it would get out of hand rather quick. They'd be just pumping themselves up if you wanted to tap them. Voice of Resurgence. This is a elemental creature for 2. Whenever an opponent casts a spell during your turn, or when Voice of Resurgence dies, create a green and white elemental creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. So, if somebody does dare to play a spell on my turn, I would basically get a free, probably at that point, gigantic creature. And even if he's not gigantic, realistically, you're pumping my army by doing something like that. And it's a creature who can pump as I'm shooting out little soldiers. We have Watley's Raptor for 2, 2/3 with vigilance, and when he enters the battlefield, proliferate. So I can choose any number of permanents and then give them another counter of each kind already there. So, he hits the board and everybody can proliferate, and that will be a little bit much, especially for 2. Another 2-drop. I like my budget creatures, if you couldn't tell. This is Marasa Root Crazer. It was really basically here for his first ability. He's a 2-drop for 2/3 vigilance, and you may tap him to put a basic land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So he's a cheap form of ramp. If you happen to have a good amount of land cards in hand, he can help you get those onto the battlefield faster. And since he's a 2-drop, he's, you can do that for pretty easy. Next we have Adaline, Resplendent Cathar. She is a star 4. Her power is equal to the number of creatures you control. She has vigilance, and whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So basically, whenever you attack, she basically makes a miniature army for you and throws it at everybody on the field. Plus, her power can get out of hand if you have a good amount of people, and she has vigilance. A 3-drop from the, I think he was both in Commander Legends and also in the Cat deck. This is Prava of the Steel Legion. As long as your turn, creature tokens you control get +1/+4. So basically, even if I have a whole bunch of just 1/1s, they are 2 5s during my turn, and you can pay 4 to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, which automatically would be 2/5 on your turn, which is kind of crazy. So he's in there. Plus, I like cat soldiers. Johnny is one of my favorite characters, just because I don't know, for whatever reason, I like the aesthetic of these cat soldier creatures. They just look cool the way they do the artwork on them a lot of times. Next, we have another version of Talia. This is Heretic Cathar from one of the earlier Innistrad sets. 3 for a 3/2 first strike, and creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So she can train other creatures. She has first strike to protect herself, and then also she's, pumping the brakes on your opponents. Next we have Apprentice Sharpshooter, one of the newer cards. It's a 3-drop for a 1/4, and she has reach and training. So I can either keep her on the sidelines and pump her with other things so that I have a answer to flyers, or if I do want to attack with her, she would train herself so that she's more of a threat to other creatures. A lot of the times in my play group, at least, we run into a situation where one person is just sitting there with no creatures, so I'm pretty sure I can get some free attacks with this deck, especially with cheating, things being as cheap as they are. Next we have Veteran War Leader for 3. Power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. I won't use her other ability, which is having to do with allies, but a 3 for what could be a rather large creature is worth it. We have laxatives, smiter from one of the guild sets. He's a 4/4 that cannot be countered, and if a spell or ability causes me to discard him, he goes onto the battlefield. So at a 3-drop, having something that can immediately start leading my army into battle and training them up to become a 4/4 at the least is well worth it. We have oddricks lunarc marshal from the original sets. At the beginning of combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. If a creature has first strike, the same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. So this is one of the reasons I have that monstrous 2-drop cat, because once he becomes monstrous, he has hexproof and indestructible. So if these two were on the board and that creature became monstrous, basically all my creatures would gain indestructible and hexproof at the beginning of combat. Next we have Barrett, Steward of Archive, 4-drop for a 2/4 vigilance, and creatures can attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. So he's basically just there to keep us safe and keep people from attacking us openly. Sorry, just waiting for that truck to pull off. Next we have Retina, called to Hunt. Her power is equal to your devotion to green, so she's at least a 2/3 on entering. And then each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it. So she don't be broke. So she would immediately make all of my soldiers hitting the battlefield into 2/2s. I have Pricket, Hero of Kinsbale, from Lorwyn. She is basically here for your, she has first strike, but her biggest thing is you tap, and she deals 2 damage to each attacking or blocking creature target player controls. So we do have a few people in the group that have army building. This would basically kill off an entire group of goblins or an entire group of spirits. Anything, like that, she would basically just tap and shoot arrows in them. So well worth it. Oddricks, Outrider. Whenever Oddricks, Outrider, or another creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So this one's good for, with me attacking it over and over. Realistically, if every time somebody dies I can move their counters around, or at least move one of those counters around more or less, then, it keeps the army built up. This is the on-crop champion. You may exert on-crop champion as it attacks. When you do, you untap all other creatures you control. So he is here basically. In one of my other decks I have the, I think, barrett, which is a creature where if he stays untapped, you can tap him and you untap all of your other creatures. This on-crop champion is basically my version of that for this deck, plus he's a 4/4, so he helps with the training. Beast Whisper, a 4-drop. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So some easy card draw for this deck since we'll be casting a lot of creature cards. We have Ivy Lane Denizen, which is a 4-drop for a 2/3, and whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So either he can have these creatures pumping themselves or pumping others. And since the human soldiers that are being made by the commander are white and green, basically this would trigger every single time I make one of those little guys. Heron's Grace Champion is a 4-drop for a 3/3. He has Flash and Lifelink. And when he enters the battlefield, other humans you control get +1/+1 and gain lifelink until end of turn. So that's a big plus to make your army overwhelming and to get some lifelink out of them when they swing. Oh yes, this guy breaks it also. This is the Sigil Captain for 4. Whenever a creature comes into play under your control, if that creature is 1/1, which these human soldiers are, put 2 1/1 counters on it. So, as I'm making these human soldiers for 1/1, Sigil Captain is immediately making them a 3/3 upon entering the battlefield, which is going to be broke. Kyler, Sagartian Emissary. I almost made a deck around this guy, but he's a 5-drop, so I thought he was a bit expensive. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Kyler. So, I'll be pumping out creatures and he'll be pumping himself. And then other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kyler. So he pumps your entire army based on the amount of counters on himself. Sagarta, Heron's Grace. Flying, you and humans you control have hexproof. So basically somebody will have to find an answer for her to target my army or me. 2, exile card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So she can pump out creatures if you have a good amount of stuff in your graveyard that you don't need. Which honestly I probably will, depending on how, swing heavy I have to be. Drizzt, because Drizzt is awesome. Doublestrike, you get a legendary 4/1 green cat creature token with trample when he enters, and whenever a creature dies, if it had a higher power, put a number 1/1 counters on Drizzt equal to the difference. So he's going to be pumping himself up if people die in battle, and then you also, it's 2 for 1 since you get this cat creature, which I couldn't find at the store today. Ixus, Prison Warden. 5-drop for a 4/4 with Flash. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, if Ixus entered the battlefield this turn, exile that creature until Ixus leaves the battlefield. So realistically, you want to save him in your hand until somebody runs their entire army at you. And if you survive, you can exile them all. Maja, Predagard, Protector. Other creatures you control get +1/+1, so that's great right off the board. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 white human warrior. So, some landfall army building. Victory's Envoy, a 5-drop for a 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. So, this will be insane if people let it live. Herald of War, 5-drop for a 3/3 flyer. Whenever she attacks, put a 1/1 counter on her, and angel and human spells cost 1 less to cast for each 1/1 counter on her. So, if you get her out when you first get to 5 mana, you could really be playing a lot of this deck for cheap. To go along with that Venom card, we have the Nessie and Boar for 5. All creatures able to block Nessie and Boar do so. becomes blocked, that creature's controller draws a card. So, it'll give the opponent some card draw, but if he's doing Death Touch, he's a 10-6, so number one, he's pumping my entire army, and number two, he's wiping out, half their board, hopefully. One of my favorite cards from Shadowmoore is Oversoul of Dusk, which is a 5-drop protection from blue, black, and red, so every color that's not in her mana cost. And the 5/5, so that's training up everybody. We have Juniper Order Ranger, a 5-drop for a 2/4. Whenever another creature comes into play under your control, put a 1/1 counter on that creature and a 1/1 counter on Juniper Order Ranger. So basically he'll be pumping himself and others as they come in. Hamza, Guardian of Irration, a 6-drop for a 5/5, but he costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. So honestly, I can get this to the point where I'm paying 2. And creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. So he helps basically the entire deck. He helps cast itself with those, all the training soldiers. Hopefully that will have counters all over them. We have a Chroma Vision of Ixidor for 7. She's a 6/6 flying, first strike, vigilance, and trample. So with oddricks, she would give everybody those traits, and that at the beginning of each combat until end of turn, each other creature you control gets +1/+1 if they have flying. The same is true for first strike, and so on for all these other abilities. So if we pair her with oddrick and they're both on the board at once, everybody's sharing their abilities, and they're getting +1/+1 for each ability they're sharing. So that's Renonk. And last but not least, we have Amara Tendris, a 7-drop for a 5/7, and she prevents all damage that would be dealt to creature tokens you control. So that's the most recent deck, guys. I was very happy to find that commander, Torens, Fist of Angels, and hopefully this deck, since it has a lot of 2-drop creatures, will just